Welcome to IVF This, episode 172, IVF and Holiday Triggers. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. After 10 years of primary and secondary infertility due to both male and female factor infertility, I am now the mother to 3 beautiful miracles. I am married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you how to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello, my beautiful friends. I hope you are all doing so well today. Before I get into this week's topic, I wanted to share a little update with you guys. I've decided for at least the next few months, I'm going to move to a bi-weekly or every other week episode release. I've had to miss several weeks over the last couple of months due to family obligations, health stuff, and I don't really like missing weeks if you guys are counting on me to drop into your podcast feed every single week. So I don't like that I'm not showing up for you in a way that I told you I was going to. So in doing this, I can kind of keep my promise that every other week you will get a new piece of content from me. But I still will have a little bit more bandwidth, a little bit more time to dedicate being present for both my immediate family, my parents, things like that. So I want you to know I'm still accepting one-on-one clients. That Take Back Your Life call, which is like the formal consultation. If you've ever wondered what it would be like to work with me, or if maybe you have something going on really pressing and you'd like some coaching on, we can do any one of those things on the Take Back Your Life call. We usually do a combination of a little bit of coaching, telling you where and how I think I could help you, and as well as getting coached on something. So you can go to either my Facebook or Instagram bios, and the Take Back Your Life call is a link in the bio, or you can go directly to my website, www.ivfthiscoaching.com, and schedule it there. It's completely complimentary, and honestly, for me, it's just a blast to meet new people, and so I hope I get to meet you soon. So let's jump into kind of the topic at hand today, which is holiday triggers. So if you've listened to me or to my podcast for any length of time, you probably know that I have a little bit of a complicated is the right word, complicated relationship with the word triggers. I'm not always the biggest fan of this. Sometimes I feel like we use it against ourselves, and sometimes we can use it against other people. Because very often we use it in a way that suggests because something happens outside of us that we are now like powerless. And we tend to kind of think of it in those black and white terms, and I don't really love that. So I really want to encourage you to think of triggers in a much more nuanced way, and thinking of triggers in a way that serves you, or at least in a way that kind of creates some awareness around whatever's happening in your body or whatever's happening in the environment around you. And so you can be more attuned to what you need and maybe even what other people need. So what do I mean? So specifically as it relates to the holiday season, now that Halloween is past, particularly in the US, it's like ramped up completely for the holiday season. So in the US, we have Thanksgiving coming up. Episode will drop earlier the week of Thanksgiving. And then it's just a mad dash to Christmas and New Year's and Boxing Day. I know that that's a big holiday, not celebrated in the US, but a big holiday around the world. And all of those are kind of really big. The holidays themselves might not be triggering, but a lot of the things that go into the holidays, family time, get-togethers, lots of cute kids doing things, can be a real like trigger landmine sort of a situation. And so that's why I wanted to bring it up today. As it relates to the holiday, what I'm talking about in terms of kind of pivoting triggers and how we think about triggers is because a lot of unexpected surprising things can happen and catch us off guard. And then we'll have an emotional response to them, right? And I think we should call it a reaction. Actually, it's probably more accurate response is that it's a reaction rather than a trigger. So maybe it's a song that comes on the radio, singing about families, about Christmas shopping, looking at Christmas lights. Maybe it's all of the get-togethers, whether it's with family or friends, um, where you can get asked all of the insanely personal questions that we get asked on the regular basis, right? Maybe it's a specific recipe that maybe you made with your family and you've been dreaming about making that recipe with your future kids. Grandparents, you're wanting to continue traditions. All of those things can be kind of a treasure trove, the opposite of a treasure trove of triggers or reactions. It really can be anything, but it's something in the external environment that happens. And then your body goes back into a time where maybe you were experiencing those emotions or that loss or that longing in real time, right? Any moment that might feel undesirable and a reaction that feels undesirable. It's not what you want. Maybe all of a sudden you're crying. Maybe all of a sudden your heart rate, maybe all of a sudden your heart is beating faster. Maybe it feels like you got punched in the gut. But your body has a response to some trigger in your external environment that reminds you of the past or suffering a loss or a failed cycle or just the kind of garden variety despair that we carry around with us on this infertility journey. And that's what I'm talking about. And we can't really control the body's reaction or initial reaction to things, but we can control how we choose to respond to our body's initial reaction. I'm going to say that again. We can choose how to respond to our body's initial reaction. And because the holidays can be so loaded with all of these sensory triggers or questions, things like that, it's a really good idea to think in advance how to prepare ourselves, right? I refer to that as coping ahead. How are we going to prepare ourselves? How are we going to cope ahead of time with what we think are stressors or what we could potentially see as stressors or triggers? Because I got to tell you, if it's going to happen, and it's probably going to happen at some point, in some way, in some form or fashion, we're going to have, by and large, an easier experience of it if we decide ahead of time how we want to respond or react to how our body reacts to the trigger, right? So the body, the thought comes up, right? The external trigger happens, a thought and a feeling come up. We can't really control those things. We can control the second thing that happens, right? So if the thought is the first thing, like, oh, here we go again, someone is asking me a question, or, oh, this is the same house I was in, 6 months ago when I had a miscarriage or something like that, right? Your body is going to remember that trauma and you're going to kind of live out some of those experiences. We don't have a hell of a lot of control over that. What we have is control over what happens next. And that's what I want to talk about. So let's say the trigger happens, right? It's a question, it's sensory, it's a memory, it's something. Our normal inclination might be to try and shut it down or make it go away or even tell ourselves that it shouldn't be there. And what I want to offer you is that no matter what the trigger is, no matter what happens in your environment, that you acknowledge your body's reaction to it as normal. As normal. Normal within the context of, I have lost this. Normal in the context of, I heard this thing, or I saw this thing, or I smelled this thing, and my body responded and reminded me how much I long for this, or how much despair I feel, or how much I fear a future without children, and what that could look like for me in my life. Your emotional reaction to any one of those things is completely normal. Like, it makes sense why your body is reacting that way. And that's what I want to remind you of. It is okay to acknowledge what is happening to you. It doesn't mean you're going to, like, if you open the door slightly and acknowledge, doesn't mean you're going to fall off a cliff, and it doesn't mean you're going to fall into a hole and you're never going to be able to get yourself out of it. Actually, by acknowledging, like, oh, that was a really loaded question, and it brought me back to a point where I'm so very fearful for what the future of IVF or the future of this infertility journey is going to bring. And so it makes sense why my heart is beating faster, my pulse is racing, right? Maybe I'm getting a little bit sweaty. Maybe it feels like I just want to run away. It makes complete sense why your body is responding that way. So when you acknowledge your body's reaction to it as normal, then you're not making it wrong. It's normal, it's expected. I understand and it makes sense why my body is having this reaction. So there's no way for it to be wrong, right? It might be inconvenient, right? It might be in the middle of your work Christmas party, and that's not super convenient, but it doesn't mean that it's not a valid experience. It doesn't mean that it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't mean it's wrong. This is where we want to utilize the phrase, this is the part where. I have a whole podcast episode dedicated to that topic of this is the part where, but it's basically a way to compartmentalize what is happening within the context of everything that's happening around you, right? So this is the part where people ask me questions and I get triggered, right? This is the part where I have a story about how the holidays should look, which is probably me surrounded by babies or kiddos or holding my pregnant belly, right? That's how I think the holidays should look. So because the holidays don't look that way, it hurts and it's really scary. And so it makes sense why my body is reacting to the fear and the sadness that I'm experiencing. This is the part where I experience painful longing when I look and see other really happy families or kind of watching the magic of Christmas through a baby's eyes or something like that, right? Those are all stories that I told myself. And those are stories that come up a lot with my clients. So I know that some of that might resonate with you guys. So to give you a really specific example, one of my clients and I were talking through the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday, right? She and I are both US based, so it makes sense. And how her and her partner will spend time with both sides of their family. So her side of the family and then her partner's side of the family. And so she was really kind of working herself up into a tizzy around how many different opportunities there would be for her and her partner to some extent experience triggers, right? That they could be triggered. Also, we talked about extended family members, the little kiddos, the babies, pregnant bellies that she might be around, and navigating all of those. So, what's your story? What do you have? Are you planning on having kids? Why haven't you had kids? All of those questions, right? And how also she was worried about like politely declining alcohol, that because she's about to go into a transfer cycle, but didn't really want to share with everyone that she's going through a transfer cycle. So we talked about all of these things. And so some of the things that she came up with was like a hand signal between her and her partner, which I think was like tucking her hair behind her ears or something like that to get her partner's attention. And that would signal to her partner, either get me out of this conversation or it's really time for us to pack up and leave. I've had my fill, we're done. And that her partner would come up with a similar signal to give to her. And the beauty of this just like small physical gesture is that it's something for only her and her partner, right? Like a code just for them to understand and decipher. So, number one, it can help her feel empowered, right? Like she gets to express her needs via signal to her partner and know that her partner will have her back however she needs it. We talked about graceful ways to navigate questions, whether it's the alcohol question or, the insanely personal questions that people ask us, reasons passing understanding, but statements ranging from like polite dodge, which is like, well, we're working on it, or, well, I have a little bit of a headache, or I'm on antibiotics, so I can't really drink alcohol. A little bit more direct. Oh, there's so many things to talk about. Let's talk about this some other time. Or to something that's much more direct, like, I don't want to talk about that at this time, right? And then just kind of giving her the permission to excuse herself from a conversation entirely if the person doesn't get the hint or you just need out of there. So those are examples of positive anchors. It's perfectly okay to not be up for whatever it is that you don't want to expose yourself to, right? It doesn't mean that you're weak, first and foremost. It doesn't mean that you're not healing or that you're not taking care of yourself. It doesn't mean anything like that. It means that you get to decide before the thing, during the thing, or after the thing that it's not, this is not it. This is not what you want. This is not how you want to experience the holidays, anything like that, right? You get to decide at any point in time when you want to stop, whether you want to stop a conversation, whether you want to stop a visit, whether you want to cancel a visit. Now, you may choose to not do any of those things, which is also your choice. But we get into a lot of trouble when we think that we have to, right? I have to go to this Christmas party. I have to do this family function. You don't have to. You don't have to. You don't not have to. You get to choose. So if it's something that you want to do, because that's maybe what you've always done, and you don't want this to be another year where you miss out on something. Maybe you feel like you've missed out over the last few Christmases or the last few holiday seasons because you don't have your family that you want, and you don't want to miss out on actual family time, like with the current family that you have. But it's from a place of empowerment. It's from a place of choice, right? Again, those are positive anchors. You're choosing ahead of time. Another example of a positive anchor could be even something physical, like a cozy sweater that you really enjoy, that you can kind of feel comfortable in, and you can wear that to the holiday get-togethers, presuming it's cold enough to wear a sweater. I know some of my clients will carry around little mementos in their pocket, like a cross, or maybe there's like a pebble or a stone or something that you find a lot of comfort in, or other thing that is small that you can keep with you and just turn to it as like a comfort thing. I have another client who really loves this particular like throw blanket. And when I say loves, I mean loves. Every time I'm on a call with her, she's got the blanket wrapped up around her. Even when we were talking during the summertime, like she loves this throw blanket. And so one of the things that we talked about was, take it with you in the car on the way to something that maybe you're not super excited about. That way you have a little bit of comfort before, and whenever it is time to leave, you get to choose to leave, and you get to have that blanket with you, that comfort with you in the car on the drive home. She did this last week at an office I think it was an office get together. And she just cried into the blanket on her drive home. Her husband was driving her home, and they were talking, but she said she felt really comforted, just getting to be around one of her favorite things and feel really grounded. And so that's an example of a positive anchor. Another thing that I would suggest is to create a resiliency plan, a holiday resiliency plan of sorts. So this is an emergency kit that you can turn to if you find yourself feeling really overwhelmed. So here are some of the things that you can put in your resiliency plan. So I have a couple of grounding exercises for you to work that you can write down and have with you, because you might need to remind yourself. And different people love different things, right? So there's no one right answer. There's no one perfect grounding routine. You might need a couple different just to keep your options open. So one might be the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise. You've probably heard me talk about this. It's where you name 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. It's a way of kind of bringing yourself back into the present moment and coming back to your environment and giving yourself a break from whatever intense experience you're having otherwise. That's a great example of a grounding exercise. Another one that I love is bilateral stimulation. So it can look like the butterfly hug. If you're watching this on YouTube, it'll make more sense. It's kind of hard to explain in a podcast, but basically you're going to hook your thumbs together, where then your left palm is over the right side of your chest and your right palm is over the left side of your chest. And you're just going to go back and forth between the two, patting your chest in just like this rhythmic motion. You don't have to think very hard while you're doing this, because you're just going back and forth, but you're stimulating the left brain and the right brain. And what you'll find is whatever intense emotion that you've had, it just kind of starts to dissipate as you're grounding, or at least that's the goal of grounding exercises. So that's another one that you can use. Another that you can use is notice your tongue and relax it. I actually do this multiple times a day because I carry a lot of tension in my jaw and then my shoulders. I know it sounds a little weird, but it works really well. So you notice your tongue, wherever it is, if it's clenched, if it's pushed up against the top of your mouth, whatever it is, right? And then you soften and relax it. And that really helps just kind of send the message to your body that you're safe. And it's a really easy thing that you can do anywhere. Nobody will notice you doing it. So put that as a grounding exercise in there as well. So that's part of creating a holiday resiliency plan. The second thing I would add to your resiliency plan is some sort of breathing technique that feels good to you. There are a lot of different breathing techniques that are out there. Some people like box breathing, where you breathe in for a count of 4, hold it for a count of 4, breathe out for a count of 4, and then hold that for a count of 4, and then you just can continue the cycle. You're essentially creating a box, so 4 counts in, 4 counts out, 4 hold counts, and so on and so forth. So I don't particularly enjoy box breathing, but a lot of people that I work with do, so I wanted to have it. My favorite breathing technique is simply to exhale longer than I inhale, right? So when you inhale, you make your body exhale longer than you inhaled, and do that for a few times, right? So if I'm inhaling, I'm going to do that for a count of 8, let's say. And then I'm going to exhale for a count of 10, right? And really just try and push all of the oxygen out of my body as much as possible. Sometimes even I get to the end of the exhalation and I'll do one more big to try and get every last bit of oxygen out of my lungs. And then I repeat that cycle. That's my favorite. I feel like I'm doing a little bit more breathing techniques and more grounding than the box breathing, but it's entirely up to you. And finally, the other thing that I would suggest for the resiliency plan is find a really good distraction technique. I know that sometimes distractions can get a bad rap, especially in like the pseudo-scientific self-help world that we have right now. Distractions like, oh, but you're not feeling your feelings. No, distraction is actually a really wonderful mechanism for helping us through really difficult times. It's definitely something that we can indulge in, which can have a negative impact, but it doesn't mean avoiding it altogether is the right plan either. Distractions can be a great thing. So we don't need to spend a lot of time thinking about what's happening or our feelings. And just we can get kind of sick of it sometimes, and that's okay. So distractions are actually pretty healthy thing for you to do. So remember, I've talked about the dual process of grief. I think I've done a podcast episode where you're going to spend some time actively grieving. You're going to spend that time crying. You're going to spend that time in really just sitting through your emotions. And then sometimes you need to distract yourself from it. And that's okay. Totally okay. So some positive distractions, healthy distractions to get your mind off of whatever that trigger might be or whatever the emotion is that you're feeling. Maybe it's a movie or a television show that you love. It doesn't even have to be a holiday movie or a holiday television, just a movie or a television. Puzzles, the New York Times Wordle and things like that. Maybe it's some sort of hobby or a book that you want to read. It doesn't really matter what it is, just as long as it helps you distract yourself for at least a short period of time. Maybe it can be a quick walk around the neighborhood, hop on your treadmill for a couple of minutes. That's always good. Doesn't have to be big, but it does have to be something that gets you away from the intensity of whatever is happening. So you give yourself some options there. And then lastly, very last thing, in your resiliency plan and just kind of in general, is I encourage you to set some boundaries. Don't be afraid of setting boundaries. If there are things that feel heavy to you and you don't want to deal with them, or there are people that maybe you feel heavy around and you don't want to deal with that, that's okay. That's okay. You are the boss of your life. You're the one living it. You're the one who has to experience it. So if there are traditions that you're not up for, if there are gatherings that you're not up for, you are absolutely allowed to say no. No, thank you. I appreciate the offer. I'm going to sit this one out, whatever that looks like. You're allowed to change the way that you do things to prioritize what feels best for you in that moment. You're not going to be taking away from other people. I promise you, if you sit out from a party, they may miss you, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you're disappointing them. It just means that they love you and they want you to be there and they miss you. But I guarantee you, the people that you really care about, they want you to do what is in your best interest as well. That resiliency plan, I gave you several examples, can be whatever you want it to be. I just want you to think about it in advance and make some choices in advance to feel good to you and that you can have your own back on. What will make that plan right for you is if you decide that this is the right plan for you. That's it. Other people don't have to agree. Other people might not agree, and that's okay. They don't have to understand. They're not the ones living your experiences. They can actively disagree and tell you that they don't think what you're doing is right. I'm really much less interested in their opinions and much more interested in your opinions on what is and what is not right for you. All right. So no right or wrong as we go into the holiday season. However you experience it is absolutely right for you if you decide that. Consider, what am I going to do if there's a trigger that happens or a reaction? I'm going to acknowledge it. This is the part where I'm going to decide how to choose my exposure, things like that. I'm going to decide what I'm up for, what I'm not. And then I want you to consider bringing some sort of positive anchor. Just like I said, a blanket, a sweater, if there's a necklace, a little token, anything like that. What could that be for you? And then the holiday resiliency plan / emergency plan to make sure that you take care of yourself in those moments before, during, and after. Those grounding exercises, those breathing exercises, have some supportive folks in advance. Maybe it's your partner, maybe it's your best friend, something like that. They know, they will be able to know what's going on and they will be able to help and support you. Have some healthy distractions in mind that you can identify in advance. And then boundaries. You get to be the boss of that, okay? So if you're not up for it, you're just not up for it. And that's okay. It doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't mean anything about you as a person or a daughter or a family member or anything like that. It just means you're not up for it, and that's okay. So that is what I have for you this week. I hope you have a wonderful week, a wonderful start to your holiday season, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.